Minutes after, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Justin O'Flaherty. I am one of the ASNs out here in the southeastern part of the country. Pouring down rain here in South Carolina today. Hopefully it's not that way where you are. We just want to thank you guys for tuning in. I know it's been a crazy past few weeks here, but really appreciate you guys tuning in and seeing what Dr. Whitacre has to say. Just a few notes of housekeeping. If you wouldn't mind muting yourselves so that we don't get any feedback. And then, as I mentioned earlier, feel free to type in the chat your discipline or where you're from for that chance to win that free recovery gel. And then also any questions that you might have, I'll be asking Lynsey at the conclusion of this so that we can get those questions answered for you. And if there's nothing else, I think we're going to go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Lynsey Whitacre. I was talking to her earlier. She said she is in sunny Florida. So hopefully she can bring that sunshine to us through this equine seminar. Take it away, Lynsey. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. We had a bunch of these seminars planned for in-person this spring, and we had planned to be this week actually at the Kentucky 3-day event there in Lexington at the Kentucky Horse Park, and we're very sad that we didn't get to make it to those in-person seminars and to the 3-day event and to the other events that we had scheduled here in the end of March through April and through May. But we are excited to bring you some virtual seminars and actually probably get to reach a larger portion of you than maybe we would have gotten to do if we were in person. So, well, it's great to see everyone's smiling faces in person. This will do for now, and we're very fortunate to be able to have you guys with us here today. So we hope that you guys are staying well, of course, and we also hope that we can take advantage of this time. Hopefully you guys are getting to spend some extra time with your horses. Hopefully you get to go visit them at the barn if they're boarded, or if not, hopefully you're getting plenty of good updates and videos of them while you have to be away from the barn, and hopefully that ends very soon. So we want to take advantage of this time to learn and to really get ahead of our horses, digestive health issues before we're ready to get back out there and hit it hard riding and competing and going to shows and doing whatever we do with all of our horses. So it's really the perfect time to get the horse's gut health in check. And actually, I think this has been kind of a nice break for a lot of people. I talk to a lot of customers who travel frequently and have a very strict regimen with their horses, and they're having a really nice time just slowing down and getting everything back in balance and putting the health of everyone first, including their horses. So it's really the perfect time to make sure we get all of that back in check and make sure we're ready to hit the pavement hard when we're able to do that again. So today we're going to talk a little bit about stress. So horses, as you probably know, are prey animals. So any perceived threat in their environment causes them to want to flee when it's possible. Of course, a lot of times that's not possible, and that can cause a lot of stress especially to prey animals. So we want to keep that in mind, that horses are prey animals as we go through this presentation, and it kind of shapes how stress affects them. But first, the most obvious question is, what is stress? This is kind of a technical definition. If you go look in the dictionary about what stress is, but I think we have a good handle on what stress is, but there's a few things about stress that I want to point out that might not be things that you generally think about. So stress results from any disruption of homeostasis. So homeostasis is basically normal in an attempt to cope with physiological, so animal changes within the animal, or environmental changes outside the animal. And stress generally results in new adaptations that can either be detrimental or advantageous to the animal. So there is a part of stress that can be good, right? If you look at this bell curve down here, we basically see, a level of pressure from low to very high and performance from low to very high. And on the low end of this, there's not a lot of pressure and the performance is very low, right? It's just kind of an area where there's boredom and, you might not see very much performance because there's not very much pressure. As you continue up this curve, you get to this area where we call the ideal zone, where you're having a moderate level of pressure, and that's actually working to the animal's advantage, right? It's increasing their alertness, it's increasing their ability to respond to stimuli in the environment, and you're getting an optimal performance, the most performance that you can. But then we get on the other side of this curve and we start to get very high pressure, very high stress, and our performance starts to go down again. So what we want to make sure we do is stick, preferably sort of in this light green area where we can achieve a very great amount of performance with our animals without them being bored, but also without them being burnt out, and monitor that stress and use it to our advantage or to the animal's advantage. So how does that work? Well, basically, when stress is initiated, there is what's called the stress response. And so when that stress response is triggered, the body starts to produce stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Probably heard of those. These initiate a ton, and there's a lot, we're going to talk about a lot of them, a ton of physiological changes within the animal that help it cope with the perceived danger. So this can be positive, right? If you think about some examples, you hear about people who can practically lift cars when they're under stress because, maybe someone's trapped under the car or something like that. It really brings strength and it brings awareness and a whole new level of physical capability to a person or to an animal when the stress response occurs. However, we know that continuous or frequent activation of the stress response can go the other side. It can be detrimental. And so we're going to talk a little bit about why that is true. And all of this kind of boils down to the fact that stress causes a whole cascade of effects in the body, which can lead to many potential side effects that can be negative for the horse. So what happens when a horse perceives stress? Okay, so first we have some kind of external event that happens that's seen as a threat by that horse. This could be anything from, a trash can being hauled down the barn aisle, which I have some horses that are terrified of, all the way to, maybe a horse that's out in pasture in the West and it's having coyotes that are circling it or something. Totally depends on the horse, right? What they perceive as being a threat. Some are more irrational than others. But basically, when we have that external event that's seen as a threat by the horse, that stress response, or some people like to call it the flight and fight response, is activated. And so when that happens, we have a whole bunch of things that start occurring. Like the heart rate is increased, breathing is increased, fats and glucose are released for energy, blood flow is diverted from non-essential body areas to the muscles and to the brain, which are really going to need it to fight or flight. Perspiration is increased, and the immune system is suppressed. So we're going to talk about a lot of these things in the next couple slides, but that's what happens when this stress response is activated. You get the release of those stress hormones that I was talking about, like adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. And then you have those basically signaling different parts of the body to undergo these physiological changes that can help the animal deal with the perceived threat. Now, when the threat is removed, i.e. the trash can has left the barn aisle or the coyotes have decided to move on, we have another hormone that gets released. That's called acetylcholine. And when acetylcholine is released, it actually provides feedback to the other stress hormones, and then adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol start to be lowered in the body. And then when that happens, your body's able to return to normal. And so that stress response is deactivated, if you will. So let's take a little look at some of these physiological changes that happen when the stress response is initiated. I think the most immediate effect of the stress response is on the respiratory system. So of course, when you are under stress, when an animal is under stress, you start to breathe harder and more quickly. And that's the purpose of that is to distribute oxygen-rich blood throughout the body. Sometimes in humans, we see this as, in extreme cases, as hyperventilation, right? You're breathing so hard and so quickly in response to some kind of perceived stress that you actually begin to hyperventilate. And so that's one of the very first effects that happens. You also have the musculoskeletal system is affected. For one thing, it's kind of working overboard, right? Trying to get the animal to have the strength that it needs to either fight or flight. But the other thing is the muscles actually start to tense up. So, for yourself, if you are having a lot of stress, you might feel tense in your neck or in your shoulders, and that's kind of an indirect response of the body to that stress. Your muscles tend to tense up, and it's really the body's natural way of trying to protect itself from injury and pain. Doesn't always necessarily work, but it's what the body thinks is best at the time. Another system that is affected is the cardiovascular system. So you'll definitely feel a horse, sometimes even if you're riding a horse and it becomes afraid of something. I think when you're riding them, you can feel their heart rate increase. That always makes me a little nervous too. It's a little stress on me, but you'll feel that heart rate increase, and then the blood pressure is increasing as well. So trying to get as much blood as possible to those essential organs like the brain and the muscles that are going to need the blood flow to operate correctly and to fight as well as they can, or flight, flee as fast as they can. Another thing that's affected is the endocrine system. So blood sugar rises, and glucose is produced by the liver to provide energy. So you'll see, in a lot of horses that are constantly under stress, they might have some endocrine system troubles, where they're constantly having high blood sugar or something like that. And you'll also see that same thing, happen in humans as well. So the endocrine system is responsible for trying to get that glucose, that energy to different parts of the body that are going to need it, again, for that same stress response to happen. The last two things are two things that we're going to talk about quite a bit as we go through the presentation. So they're things that I think, on the first slide, all those things, I think you can understand pretty easily why the cardiovascular system is affected, why the respiratory system is affected, and why you're getting the endocrine response that you would see in a horse. But two things that I think we think about less in terms of stress is the gastrointestinal system and the immune system. And actually, the reason why these two things are affected so much by stress is because they're what the body deems as non-essential. That's a term that's, I almost feel like it's a buzzword these days, but it's really the same as things that we've, deemed non-essential during this pandemic that we're in currently. They're things that can just wait until later, right? So the body is saying, okay, I'm under a huge amount of stress here. I really need to divert blood flow. I need to divert energy. I need to divert all of my resources towards the essential processes that are going to keep me alive. And right at this very moment, the gastrointestinal system is not what's going to keep me alive. The immune system is not necessarily what's going to keep me alive. What's going to keep me alive is getting blood flow and energy and glycogen to the muscles so that I can run as fast as I can. And so these non-essential processes like the gastrointestinal system and the immune system kind of get put on the side burner. Really no different than right now where things like, getting elective surgeries are kind of just seem non-essential right now. Yes, they're important for your health, and they might even be important in the long term for your life, just like the gastrointestinal system. We certainly can't live without it. But for right now, they're not the most important thing. And that's how the animal operates too. So when the animal's under stress, it slows down the whole gastrointestinal system because the blood flow is being diverted away from the gut and towards muscles and towards the brain. And it just really slows down digestion and just kind of puts that on hold. It's the same thing with the immune system, really. And the immune system being slowed down is a little bit of a result of the gastrointestinal system being slowed down, because 70% of the immune cells in the body are actually located in the gut. So if you slow down the gut, you actually indirectly slow down the immune system as well. The other thing that happens is that cortisol, that stress hormone we were talking about, when the stress response is initiated and cortisol levels begin to increase, cortisol lowers lymphocyte counts. So lymphocytes are those B cells and those T cells you probably remember hearing about sometime, I don't know, in high school biology, maybe for the first time. But they're those immune cells that help us, fight off infection and all that kind of stuff. And cortisol actually works to lower those lymphocyte counts in the body. And so that's how the immune system can become weakened when you're under stress. Okay, so what causes stress for horses? I think some of these are sort of, we can easily understand how they cause stress for the horses. Some maybe are ones that we don't think about so much. So one thing I think that really causes a lot of stress for horses, in fact, if you want to do a study on a supplement or something that causes stress to horses, the way you would do that study is you would put the horses in a trailer. You would haul them around for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, and you would take them back, and then you could collect blood samples, and you would see how much stress it actually causes on those horses by monitoring things like cortisol. So when researchers want to do stress studies on horses, they initiate stress by trailering them around. So we certainly know that hauling animals causes stress. We also know that competition causes stress. Not only do most horses have to be hauled when they are competing, but they're also in a new environment. They can feel that maybe their rider is nervous and that things are a little different, and that causes stress for them. Training can be stressful for some horses. It really depends on the horse. For other horses, training can actually kind of be a relaxing thing for them. So it really just depends on the horse and the trainer or rider and what they're doing. Diet changes can be really stressful for horses for a variety of different reasons, but it can just be, any change in their daily routine that can cause stress. Parasites and worming can also be stressful for horses. So that's one thing that I think we don't always think about, but can really cause a lot of stress for the horse. And also stress can lead to more parasite infection as well. So that can go both ways. Vaccinations can certainly cause stress. Again, that's a change in, the normal routine for the horse and can initiate stress in that way. Anytime really that you have any vet work, I think there's some stress that can be caused to the horse, especially if it requires them to be put under a slight tranquilizer or something like that. Reproduction, breeding horses, of course, can cause stress. That's not something that they're necessarily used to in a lot of cases, so it can cause stress. Of course, foaling can certainly cause stress. And then we have it down at the bottom, but certainly weaning as well can cause stress. New pasture mates. I actually in the top right-hand corner, I chose this picture. And not only is this horse, he doesn't look very stressed, he actually looks pretty comfortable, but not only is he at a competition, but you can see, he can see all of the neighbors that are around him, the way that these stalls are set up at this competition. And so that can be really stressful for a horse, because, you know, here's, in this case, I think there's a stall to the left of him. So there's maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new horses that are around him. And that can certainly be very stressful for these herd animals that really like to stay with the horses that they know. Weather changes can cause a huge amount of stress for horses. Not only are some horses, you know, concerned about changes in the weather, but I think a lot of people too can relate to this. As the barometric pressure changes, that changes a lot about the physiology of the body and can initiate some pain or some uncomfort that the horse doesn't really understand. And so that can be stressful and concerning for them. And then limiting turnout can be stressful for them. You know, obviously they're grazing animals, they're meant to be outside, and confinement can be stressful, especially if they're used to being turned out a lot. And then, you know, say you go to a competition or a rodeo and they go from being out in a 20-acre pasture full time to being in a stall for a couple days, that can certainly be stressful. Really, any kind of routine changes, you know, can stress out the horse. So that's good to keep in mind. So what are the negative impacts of stress for the horse? A lot of these we see outwardly, but some of them are happening internally as well. So we certainly know that because the stress response diverts blood flow away from that gastrointestinal tract, which it's deeming non-essential, that you get a lot of decreased digestion and absorption. You can also run into a lot of problems with colic, hindgut or gastric ulcers, weight loss, which is obviously a result of possibly any of those 3 things that are above it, diarrhea and digestive upset, going off feed or water, so not wanting to eat or drink. We see that, I think, especially with horses that are being trailered. A lot of times they don't want to drink water and can get severely dehydrated. Of course, we talked about the immune system being weakened. You can also see reproductive inefficiencies. So again, when a horse is under stress, reproduction is fairly non-essential, right? So that's something that they won't partition nutrients or energy towards if they're under chronic stress. You can see low performance. You can see behavioral changes, like the picture here is showing a horse that cribs. You can see behavioral changes like that. You can see a lot of pacing or weaving in the stall, other things like that that can indicate stress for the horse, ongoing stress. Another thing that you might see is a dull hair coat. Again, that's probably a result of some of the things that you see over here on the left side of the screen. And actually, we're going to talk about these things that we have on the left side of the screen here in a little bit more detail. Whoops. So the first one is decreased digestion and absorption. So when you look at horses, you can actually study some weight loss in horses and find out that the main cause for weight loss is generally stress. So when your horse is putting more energy into that stress response that we've talked so much about, they're not able to maintain the energy for, again, non-essential things like weight management and coat health. So all the nutrients, or a lot of the nutrients, are being partitioned towards that stress response. And if that's chronic, if they're under some kind of chronic stress, then you're going to continue to partition nutrients towards that and not to things like maintaining body condition, maintaining coat condition, maybe even maintaining hoof health, things like that. The other thing is stress is a major cause of colic, digestive upset, and diarrhea. So again, this is all kind of related. Digestion slows down and immunity is weakened, and that's when the problems occur. So we often call this dysbiosis in the gut microbiome. So I'll explain each of those words. The gut microbiome is the population of bugs, of bacteria, and of fungi that live in the horse's gut. And dysbiosis is what occurs if the bad bugs, because there are some, begin to outnumber the good bugs. And that's when problems start to arise. And that's a result of a couple things, right? One, the immunity is weakened, so the bad bugs are kind of left to run rampant around the gut. And two, the good bugs they're really fueled by the forage and the different components of the diet, mainly pasture, hay, that kind of stuff. And so if you have a horse that's, not digesting things as well, not eating as much forage, the good bugs can start to sort of die off. And that's when those bad bugs will really start to take over. And that's what we call dysbiosis. There's a lot of research on dysbiosis, and it certainly does cause colic and digestive upset and diarrhea. The other thing that you might hear some about, as you read different articles, both about humans and horses and dogs and all kinds of species, is kind of a new thing that's been being researched a lot called leaky gut syndrome. So we know that leaky gut is a result of stress. We don't know exactly why yet, but we know that animals under stress often have guts that are quote unquote leaky. And what that means is that the intestine, the gut, has become more permeable. And what that means is that it's starting to leak molecules into the bloodstream, like toxins and bacteria that should not be getting into the bloodstream. So the gut is very, very good, generally, at discerning between things that are good and things that are bad, things that should be absorbed and things that shouldn't be absorbed. And so it's able to sort of regulate that and keep, the bad stuff like bacteria and toxins from getting into the bloodstream, while also allowing the good stuff like nutrients and water into the bloodstream easily. But when it's under stress, we have this leaky gut syndrome, and the intestine becomes more permeable and lets more of those bad toxins and bad bacteria into the bloodstream. And that can result mostly in diarrhea, but also in a lot of other diseases that it's now being linked to in different species, especially autoimmune diseases, allergies, all that kind of thing. So what are the signs of colic in horses, since we just talked about that? Well, there's quite a few, and I think it's a little bit different for each horse. But traditionally, you might see a horse pawing. They won't want to eat. They might have general discomfort. If they haven't had any poop in their stall for a while, that could be an indication that they're colicking. If you put your ear next to their belly, you probably won't hear any gut sounds. You might see the horse sweating. Again, they might have been under stress, which caused the colic, but then the colic causes more stress. So you're going to see the symptoms of stress again, like sweating, increased heart rate, increased breathing, and those kinds of things. You also might see the horse laying down or rolling, trying to get comfortable, and possibly looking back at its belly, trying to figure out why it hurts so bad, and also not wanting to drink. So if you see those signs, you might wonder if your horse is colicking, and if you do see a lot of those signs, it's probably best to contact a vet. But that's one thing that stress can really initiate, and one reason why we want to manage stress. Another thing that we see commonly in horses that are stressed is equine gastric ulcer syndrome. So in horses, stress is a primary cause of gastric ulcers, which are these lesions in the stomach, which you can see some of down here at the bottom of the slide. So depending on what population of horses you look at, in show horses, it's about 60%, and in race horses, it's about 90% of horses that suffer from ulcers. Interestingly enough, ulcers have also been reported with some amount of frequency in pasture horses and also in foals. So that's something that indicates to us that it's not just a problem with horses that are performance horses. And prevention of these ulcers is really key in horses. They cause a lot of pain and a lot of symptoms that we'll talk a little bit more about here in a second, but it's really best to try to prevent them in horses because they're really, something that affects them so commonly. But you may ask why performance horses are affected by ulcers so commonly. Of course, 90% of horses being affected is probably the most prevalent disease that we see in horses. And so you might ask yourself why that happens. Well, horses are grazing animals, and they're designed to take in forage about 20 hours a day. So they're expected, designed to be out there in fields grazing all the time. And as such, they secrete stomach acid continuously. The problem that happens is that a lot of times they are not intaking forage continuously. We have horses that are in stalls. They're not able to be fed that often in a day. I have a horse that I'm pretty sure if she ate 20 hours a day, her belly would touch the ground because she would literally never, ever stop. She would definitely eat 24 hours a day. But there's a lot of reasons why we don't have that happening in practice today. And so it really challenges the way that the stomach is designed. The other thing is that cortisol, so back to that stress hormone, when we have this stress response and cortisol begins to increase, it actually indirectly increases production of stomach acid even more than it already would be produced in horses. So that certainly drives the ulcer problem home a little bit harder. If you look at how the equine stomach is developed, you'll see in this picture here, there's really two portions. So this portion on the bottom is called the glandular portion of the stomach. And so this is actually where the stomach acid lives, if you will. And this part of the stomach actually has a protective lining that protects it from the acid. Up here we have the non-glandular portion of the stomach. And generally there's no acid up here, and because of that, there's no protective lining in this part of the stomach. So a lot of times what happens and why having an empty stomach or not grazing, all day long can cause ulcers in horses is that when the stomach is empty, the acid from this glandular portion of the stomach will sort of splash up onto this non-glandular portion where there's no protective lining and cause these lesions or ulcers to start developing. Again, that's driven further by stress because the cortisol increases the amount of acid that's actually being produced in the stomach. It's also why performance horses and race horses have a higher incidence of ulcers than other horses, because it's believed that when they're running or when they're training, when they're moving around, essentially that causes this acid to possibly splash up onto this non-glandular portion of the stomach more frequently than it would in a horse that is not doing a lot of extreme exercise. We can also see ulcers in the glandular portion of the stomach. It's just not as common because that part has the protective lining. Now, when we have a full stomach, when a horse has just been out to pasture and eaten a lot of forage, or when it's just finished a meal where it had a lot of hay or other type of roughage, you kind of have that sitting here in the stomach, and it actually helps prevent that acid from splashing up onto this non-glandular portion of the stomach and can help prevent the development of ulcers. So if you do have ulcers that are developing, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to discern between ulcers and colic. A lot of the risk factors and some of the signs, not as many, are the same. So some of the risk factors that we have for both ulcers and colic are, of course, stress and changes in routine and hauling, restricted turnout, all the things that we've already talked about, as well as NSAID use, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like bute and banamine can also increase the incidence of ulcers and colic for different reasons, but both. Stall rest can be another risk factor. And then, of course, like we just talked about, lack of grazing or restricting the turnout. Some of the differences is generally if you're seeing weight loss in a horse, that's a sign of ulcers, can be a sign of ulcers. Also, if the performance is low, they have a dull hair coat, or like stretching out a lot, that can be a sign of ulcers. Colic is where you see, we talked about those colic symptoms a little bit more about not wanting to eat and drink, although ulcers can reduce appetite as well too. Not pooping, having decreased gut sounds, and then doing that pawing and that rolling. So now we know that stress can certainly have some very significant effects on our horses, can cause almost every system in their body to change the way that it's operating, which can result in a lot of negative side effects, including decreased digestion and absorption, colic, digestive upset, and diarrhea, and gastric ulcers. But what can we do about it? Well, the first thing we can do is try to prevent stress. So if possible, we can reduce stressors, recognizing that each horse is different and different things are going to cause each horse to be stressed out. And some might be more stressed out by one thing than another. We know that hauling stresses horses, like I was telling you. That's how they actually induce stress in research studies, but it might stress out one horse more than another. It's also important to maintain a consistent schedule with training, diet, and routine to help prevent stress. Horses do not like change. They prefer to keep everything the same. Turning out frequently or just providing something for the horse to do can help prevent stress as well. Now that we're all in quarantine here, I think we can understand that to some extent. It's nice to just get out, to just leave your house or for the horse to leave their stall and go do something different. That can be very good at helping them relax and preventing stress. The other thing is we can do a lot of preventative maintenance to protect our horse's entire GI tract, all the way from the foregut, the stomach, all the way back to the hindgut where we have that population of microbes. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation, but that's one thing we can do as well. Now, we certainly know that we can't prevent stress entirely, right? We have competition horses, we have rodeo horses, we have horses that we want to take out and go to competitions and go to shows, and we have horses that are going to require visits by the vet to do stressful procedures. We're going to have change in our barns, and so our horse might be next to a new horse one week because we have new horses in the barn. We're going to have storms. We're going to have things just in daily life that we can't prevent that are going to cause stress to the horse. So the next thing is, beyond trying to prevent stress as much as we can, how do we mitigate the effects of stress, okay? So what can we do, because we know our animals are going to be under some level of stress, what can we do to prevent those negative side effects that we talked about? And a lot of this has to do with keeping the gut healthy and keeping it functioning. So there's support that we can provide to the gut in the hindgut, where that population of microbes lives, and in the stomach, where we see those ulcers often forming. And then again, we can provide continuous access to forage the best that we possibly can for those horses. It's also important to ensure good hydration and nutrition. So obviously when horses are under stress, a lot of times because of all those changes that are taking place, the increased respiratory rate, the increased heart rate, we're going to need to replenish the water that was lost. In a lot of cases that will cause, sweating and further loss of water as well. It's been shown that horses prefer room temperature water. So when we give our horses water, we try to make sure that it's, not too cold for them. Also providing salt can be really helpful with getting horses to drink and also better hydration, because it helps for the water to be more efficiently absorbed. And then the next thing is to really provide a balanced diet to replenish the nutrients besides water that are used in that stress response. So we know, for example, that some things like B vitamins, for example, are used more quickly when a horse is under stress. And so we want to make sure that we provide enough of those in the diet that we replenish what's lost. Okay, so as promised, here's a couple ways that we can suggest to you to support the gut. So Vitalize, which is our brand of gut health supplements for horses and dogs, works really to keep the gut steady. Our slogan for this brand is called a good gut feeling. And basically that means to ultimately, decrease digestive health problems and work to keep the gut functioning in its roles of digestion, absorption, and also protection of the rest of the body from any bacteria and toxins that might be consumed. So the way that Vitalize helps support the gut is actually through an ingredient that is in all the Vitalize products called Amifirm. Amifirm is Biozyme's research-proven prebiotic. So a prebiotic works to stimulate the good bacteria in the horse's gut. I'm sure you guys have heard of probiotics. The difference between prebiotics and probiotics is that with a probiotic, you're actually adding a live bacteria into the gut. With a prebiotic, you are just stimulating the bacteria that are already there. Generally, it's thought that most animals already have the bacteria that they need in their gut. And so if you can stimulate those to be more efficient and to replicate faster and to do their respective jobs better, that tends to work out really pretty well. So Amifirm has been proven through research to increase digestion and absorption, and also help through increasing gut health to support the immune system. So the pictures that you see down below are cartoon images that were made from electron microscope images of a gut that from an animal who's not fed Amifirm and one that is fed Amifirm. And so just to give you a quick overview of how Amifirm works, this green portion of the picture represents the fiber or the forage in the diet. These little red things are bacteria. This blue thing is a fungal microorganism that's living in the gut microbiome. And these little yellow things are enzymes. So what we know about Amifirm is that, one, it stimulates the fungi in the gut. So you'll see in the control here, this is the fungi. And when we have an animal that's on Amifirm, the fungi is growing out a lot more, it's branching out a lot more, and that helps to begin digesting or breaking apart the forage. We also see with Amifirm that we get a lot more enzyme secretion. So I'm sure you're aware that enzymes are a very important part of the digestive process, and so that helps to further digestion as well. And then we also have more bacteria. It's a little bit hard to tell from this image, but we also know that Amifirm increases the number of bacteria that are actually living inside the gut that help further that digestive process as well. So it's kind of a threefold way to increase digestion. And we know that those happen with Amifirm in the hindgut to increase digestion. And then we also know that Amifirm is able to work alongside the intestine to increase absorption of nutrients as well. And in fact, it can help increase absorption of nutrients by up to 30%. So in our quest to continue to support the gut, Amifirm is very good, like I just described to you, at supporting the hindgut, but can also provide some benefits to the stomach or the foregut as well. But we also have another product, which is focused around an ingredient called MHB3 hyaluronan, which is research proven and patented. It's a polysaccharide that can be used alongside other natural ingredients to help support the integrity of the GI tissue in the stomach. So basically how this works is it's targeted at supporting the stomach or the foregut. And again, the main problem we see in the stomach is those gastric ulcers. And so when we combine MHB3 hyaluronan with other natural ingredients, we're able to help coat the stomach, promote the tissue hydration of the GI tissue, and increase its resilience to lesions or ulcerations, and also promote wound healing. So taking those things in mind, we basically have 3 products in the Vitalize brand that have been designed for helping your horse win the game against stress, to help mitigate those effects of stress. Using them together will certainly help protect the horse's digestive tract all the way from the foregut or the stomach to the hindgut. So those 3 are Vitalize Digest More Plus, which again is a pelleted supplement that has that Amifirm, the prebiotic in it. It can help prevent colic and digestive upset. Of course, it aids in weight gain because we're increasing digestion and absorption, and it also supports those good gut microbes in the hindgut. The next one for the foregut or the stomach is our Vitalize Albumin product. Again, it's a natural gastric health product that helps prevent ulcers and thin GI tissue. It works differently than a lot of other ulcer medications or supplements on the market because it does not change the production of acid, and so it does not hinder digestion. Instead, it really works with the horse's biology to prevent and heal ulcerations in the stomach. The third one, so those are both products that are designed to be fed on a daily basis. The third one is a product that is specifically designed to be fed to horses when they are under stress or before they might have a stressful event. So maybe before they get on the trailer to haul to a horse show or something like that. And that's the Vitalize Equine Recovery Gel. It is a prebiotic gel designed, again, for times of stress that provides rapid gut relief and helps support the hindgut. It can help prevent colic and digestive upset and other negative effects of stress. And it contains research-proven ingredients, including Amifirm, which again helps support those good gut microbes. Another ingredient called moss, M-O-S, not M-O-S-S, not like the moss on your pond, but a different kind of moss, that helps get rid of pathogenic bacteria that are trying to colonize the gut, that are often, trying to be opportunistic and under times of stress. It also contains some antioxidants, some B vitamins, and some electrolytes to help replenish those nutrients that we discussed, can be exhausted during different times of stress. So it's a great product for any time you think the horse might be under stress, or if the horse has already been under stress and you want to help it recover as quickly as it can from that. So those are our 3 products for stress, and that's a little bit about the whole stress response and what it can do to your horse. Remember, stress can be positive. It can help the horse perform to the best of its ability, but it can also be negative, especially when it becomes chronic, and can have some negative side effects when it continues to happen to horses. So we want to manage stress. We know that we can't prevent stress 100% of the time, but there are things that we can do to help mitigate those negative side effects of stress including supporting the digestive tract, both the stomach and the hindgut. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Justin, and I think she has some good news for us.
Absolutely. And if you guys have any questions, make sure to type that in the chat. Lynsey's still available to answer any of those questions that you guys might have. I know that I've gotten some questions from my customers on when to use certain products. And so Lynsey is kind of our go-to girl when it comes to that. So make sure if you've got any questions to go ahead and type that in the chat. But the winner of our stress gel is going to be Tracy B. I'm not going to attempt your last name. My last name gets botched all the time, so I won't do that to you. But Tracy B, you are the winner. So if you could please email Haley. Her email is here on the screen, and make sure to shoot her an email to claim that. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. Obviously, as we can read this slide, make sure to like us and share with your friends on social media. If you guys have any questions on where to find a dealer, you can certainly find that on our website. If you have any other product related questions, or if you want to see that we might have any other products available within the Vitalize line, we do have a full dog line as well. That would be on that Vitalize website. And then there is Dr. Whitacre's email right at the bottom of the slide, as we can see. So if we don't have any other questions, I just want to thank you guys for attending and joining. We really appreciate it. We know that we're going through a kind of crazy time right now. Hopefully this will all be over soon and we can get back to doing the thing. So we appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.